Mike Sanella here with a special video for, well, all of my various channels, including the Captain Phoenix channel, Mike Reads, the Mike Sanella Show, and all of my other platforms, including those on Library, BitChute, Parler, and God forbid Twitter. Today, I want to talk about why it is that I have, over the last 2 to 3 weeks, not lived up to the promise that I made a little over a month ago to become much more active on these channels and on these platforms. And the short version, as I get right into it, is that the town I live in turned out to be the absolute epicenter of the damage caused by Tropical Storm Isaias. The storm utterly flattened our town, and I might as well just dox myself and tell you what town that is, and that's the town of New Milford, Connecticut. Tropical Storm Isaias hit our shores and came inland as a tropical storm, which was a once-in-a-century occurrence. The forecasters did not properly actually forecast that because the storm and the damage that it brought with us came from the winds that were supposed to remain offshore, and which we didn't find out about until the morning the storm hit, which was on the morning of Tuesday, August 4th, when the storm took a sudden and sharp turn towards the northwest, which was totally unexpected from all of the forecasters. In a town of less than 30,000 people, 91 roads were closed. And I don't mean that they were closed because there was some dangling power line and, although you could probably work your way around it, it was just a matter of safety, so they decided to close the roads. No, 91 roads were closed by the morning of Wednesday the 5th, so after some cleanup had already begun, because trees were down across the road, and there was literally no way to pass the road. Now, that doesn't mean that there were 91 trees down. In fact, there were a lot more than that, because once you got through the road closure, it turns out there were more trees that were down on top of that. And these are just the trees that came down across the roads. The type of damage this storm caused in my town was the type of damage this town has never seen. And I want to commend the community for the community response to the damage that happened in this storm. And the thing I want to point out is that although 91 roads were closed on the morning of the 5th, by the afternoon of the 5th, every single tree that was down and was not across power lines had been cleaned up at least enough for you to pass through. Now, of course, I'm not counting in what I've just relayed to you folks, the amount of damage that was done to homes, to vehicles, and to property in general as trees fell across people's homes and driveways and cars and such. So the reason that this cleanup happened so fast in terms of the trees that were not across power lines isn't necessarily because there was a great response from the town of New Milford and their DPW. They did work their tails off to get that part of the mess at least cleaned up. And it wasn't necessarily because of the specific efforts of guys like Sean Emmons, Joe Carwanta, Sam Gentile, Ted Giddings, the guys over at Tree Monsters, and the guys over even at Lewis Tree, who I commend because, of course, they were working asinine amounts of overtime trying to clear up what they actually could clear up in the meantime. But also because, and most importantly, of the fact that every human being in New Milford who had a chainsaw went out of their own volition, on their own dime and on their own time on the afternoon of the 4th and worked oftentimes through the night to clear up enough of the roads for people to at least get by, even if it meant turning a 2-lane road into a temporarily 1-lane road. So I want to commend the community for their response. And yes, that includes the tree companies. And yes, that includes TPW. And yes, that includes, most importantly, all of the people in town who happen to volunteer their time to get through this part of the storm at the very least. And of course, what I'm talking about is every adult male in town over the age of 18, because every adult male over the age of 18 in this town seems to have a chainsaw, probably in response to the storm that hit us in October of 2011. Yes, it was a snowstorm that knocked out power and crippled this town for a very long time. Now, the reason that was the case was because for 40 years, CLNP openly refused to do any pruning of any of the trees. And when you had this sudden heavy snowfall that turned eventually into an ice storm with trees that were still very heavily leaved because it was in the middle of October when this storm hit, yeah, those limbs are going to come down and take down the power lines. Since then, the community and even Eversource has done, I think, a very good job of keeping these trees pruned and keeping as much of the limbs away from the power lines as reasonably can be done. But this storm wasn't like that. We had 50-mile-an-hour sustained winds with 70-plus-mile-an-hour gusts, which uprooted whole trees, healthy whole trees that were like 90 feet tall and like 6 feet across, and just dumped them on power lines. So the thing is that what this resulted in is that my office, which you're looking at now, and my home, which is across the street, was without power for 3 days. Now, I don't have much to complain about that, but we were also without cell service without any reliable cell service, at least, for 3 days as well, and so was the rest of the community. And the reason that I was even without reliable cell service is because, well, folks, this tree came down across these power lines, which provide alternating current for this cell tower. That cell tower happens to also be the primary cell tower of cell phone users in New Milford. It's AT&T's main tower, and it happens to be the one located right in the center of town. So communicating at all became incredibly difficult, which means that the folks that I work with, say with the Liberty Block, and the folks that I work with on my channel to get information, well, there was no way to communicate with them. No reliable way, anyways. And the other thing that happened was that because of the storm and the damage it created, some of you may know that I do a lot of landscaping on the side, in addition to the media production company I own. Excuse me. And the amount of work that I got as a result of the storm, and have now permanently gotten because of the people that were satisfied with the work I did in responding to the storm, has just completely overwhelmed me. And I've also picked up a lot more work when it came to the media production company, which has kind of overwhelmed me as well. And it wasn't because necessarily that I was out of power for just 3 days, because I was one of the few people that got power back in those 3 days. And I would argue that the only reason I got power was because, well, the power lines that were damaged that provide electricity to my block also provide electricity to that AT&T cell tower. And I guarantee the only reason that got cleaned up at all was because some higher up at AT&T called up Eversource, the power company in town, and said, "Hey, our attorneys are at your doorstep. How about you clean up that tree?" And I know what everyone's going to say. "Mike, you were without power for 3 days. It's been 3 weeks. What's going on?" Well, to put it succinctly, I got my power restored way before everyone else did. My power was restored very late on the night of Thursday the 6th. Remember that the storm hit us on the afternoon of the 4th. That's a Tuesday. By Saturday morning, so we're talking roughly 4 days in, roughly 3/4 of New Milford still was without power. And for all intents and purposes, no one I even knew had even so much as seen one Eversource truck out on the roads. So I got to commend the efforts of our community, but yes, Eversource in every way dropped the ball on this issue. Over a week later, 20% of homes were still without power. 20% of this town's residencies were completely without power, and that includes some businesses, a week after the storm hit. And that's with trees that had been pruned up to that point. So to those of you who say that Eversource's response has been, well, negligent, I might be with you on that one. I think it has definitely been horrendous. And if we're going to get into briefly how that response has kind of been, then let's talk about that tree that was at the end of my block. This, folks, is a picture of 3 Lewis trucks, the tree company that's hired by Eversource to clean up their trees when they come down. They're waiting for a lineman to come to the pole to flip a switch and turn the power off so they can safely remove this tree that you saw earlier, which took out these power lines, which we referenced earlier. Inside these 3 trucks are 2 tree guys each. Now, to put things into perspective, these trucks are not just pickup trucks you can get for $30,000, $40,000, or even $50,000. These are highly specifically built trucks that Lewis probably spent $250,000 on. And they're sitting there idling, waiting for a lineman to come by to climb a pole and flip a damn switch. The lineman, of course, is coming from Eversource. Those 6 tree guys I mentioned inside those trucks, yeah, those aren't just landscapers. Those aren't $16 an hour landscapers. Those are tree guys. That means they all have to have licenses. They all have to have a very specific, highly developed skill set to do what it takes to do their job, which happens to also be routinely, famously, one of the 3 or 4 most dangerous jobs in America and is often number one. I think in 2017 or 18, it was the most dangerous job outside of the military in the United States. So yeah, those guys are probably making like $30 an hour. So yeah, that's 6 guys at like $30 an hour inside $750,000 trucks, idling them, waiting for a lineman to get there to climb a pole and flip a damn switch so that they can safely clean up that tree. That means that every minute that they're sitting there idling is one really expensive minute. And I wouldn't have brought this up except for the fact that they were there for 8 hours before they finally just bailed because the lineman never showed. And I don't blame the lineman and I don't blame Louis Tree because Louis Tree was called by Eversource and told to go to this site because there's a lineman coming to flip a switch, so we need you there to clean up this tree so we can get this line fixed and get AT&T's attorneys out of our office. I don't blame Louis for this. I talked to the foreman there, and he said that he had been calling Eversource every hour on the hour to find out where that damn lineman was. And Lewis's response was, well, he's going to be there today. We can't tell you when. And Louis, if they leave and the guy shows up, I mean, then the tree doesn't get picked up. Like, of course it's their duty to sit there and wait for that lineman to get there. They can't afford to not be there and perform the job that they were hired to do when it comes time to do that job. The sad part is that the lineman finally did show up, right? And I don't blame Louis Tree for telling these $30 an hour guys to go home at 6 o'clock at night after having sat there for 8 hours, right? They just ate it. And of course, they're going to bill Eversource for that. And Eversource is going to have to pay that bill. And by the way, that's why your rates are going up, is because of incompetence like this from the administrative level over at Eversource that can't figure out how to make a phone call to a lineman and say, hey, the Louis Tree guys have been there for 4, 5, 6 hours. Please go over there and flip the damn switch so they can get their job done and go home so we don't get billed for these hours that they're sitting there doing nothing. The sad part is that the lineman did eventually show up on the night of the 4th. He showed up at like 9 o'clock, 9:30 at night, right? Louis Tree then sent out one truck with 2 guys in it and had the mess cleaned up in 1 hour. 1 hour. So 1 truck, 2 guys, 1 hour. That's all Eversource should have been billed for. And instead it was 1 truck, 2 guys, 1 hour, plus 3 trucks, 6 guys, 8 hours. So folks, if you're wondering why your rates are going up, that's why they're going up. So to pull things in from the political and to bring things back to why it is I haven't really been as active as I could have been over the last 3 weeks, it's because this ridiculous level of incompetence continued for a week after that. And the aftermath of the storm has completely wreaked havoc on this town. And the result, of course, is that people have come to me for kind of a lot of things. The Lions Club, we ran a food drive that became partly in response to this because people were without food. People couldn't cook because they had no electricity. People's food spoiled all across town, and some people couldn't afford to completely restock their refrigerators in one fell swoop. So there was a lot that I've been doing over the last 2 to 3 weeks that has come in the aftermath of this storm. I've gotten more work than I could possibly take care of, and I'm probably honestly going to have to start saying no, unfortunately. And of course, my media production company has kind of really flourished, not really as a result of the storm, but just coincidentally in the aftermath of that. So I've been overwhelmed. The 3 weeks are now basically over. I apologize sincerely to all of my viewers and subscribers for not being more active, as I promised on all of these channels, but those 3 weeks are now up. And I tell you what, I'm going to be a lot more active now. So for those of you waiting for that response video to those YouTube comments on my video on Vosh, it's coming. It's coming. I was editing it 3 weeks ago and I haven't had time to go back to it, but it's coming. Go ahead and hold out your hate for another 3 weeks. Sorry, not another 3 weeks, but just a little while longer, and it's coming. As are the rest of my reads on the Federalist Papers. And for those of you watching on MikeReads, yes, I will eventually announce the next book. Hopefully it will be by the end of next week at least. I've got a lot of work I have to do outside of these channels. I'm doing it for free. Notice that I have deliberately not monetized any of these channels. Hope you've enjoyed. And, well, we'll see you in the next few weeks. Night, folks. yell to keep up with the wind. Oh, the wind finally died down a little bit. So we're gonna go over to this row of trees here over Canterbury High School. So you can kind of see there's been a whole bunch of branches knocked down. You can hear the police sirens in the background. Wind's about to pick up. I don't see anything building behind me in terms of like a tornado or anything. Just to give you an idea, just hard. I'm just blowing right now because I'm having trouble standing up, and just so much is taking this footage. That's actually kind of a cool shot. Welcome to Canterbury High School, where the wind is howling.